Hi, folks. Welcome back. Here we are with Philosophy 110. I'm your instructor, Victor Fabiana Bundesguerra, and here we are with our next recorded lecture. Last time we were looking at Descartes and his first meditation, namely his skepticism, his dreamer argument, his evil demon argument, and we were left in a position, according to him, maybe you disagree, where we really can't know anything about the outside world, not even that our hands are our hands, or anything requiring inference and logic. And again, he thinks that this is a useful exercise to establish, therefore, then in our knowledge, a certain base or certain foundation, a sturdy foundation upon which to build all other knowledge. He thinks that's good, right? So let's go ahead and get into his second meditation and see how he solves the situation we are in. So where are we again? Well, not in the great place. Descartes has fallen asleep and waking up the next day in real life when he was writing this in front of his fireplace, and he continues meditating and continues writing by saying the following. I will suppose then that everything I see is spurious, deceitful, not true. I will believe that my memory tells me lies, and that none of the things that it reports ever happen. I have no senses, body, shape, extension, movement, and places are chimeras, deceit. So what remains true? What remains true? And again, he can't know any of that because that doesn't pass Cartesian skepticism. He says perhaps just the one fact that nothing is certain. Maybe all we can really know is that we don't know anything. That is, after all, what Socrates, the famous ancient Greek philosopher, said. All I know is that I know nothing. We cannot be sure of the existence of anything that the senses tell us, the external world, that we have a body, anything requiring inference, mathematics, and logic. We cannot even be sure of the existence of God at one point, he even says. And he's a religious person, so this is a big deal to him. We can't be sure that we have a body. Can we be sure that we exist at all if we don't even have a body? Does it follow that I too, he says, do not exist? No. If I convince myself of something that necessarily existed, think about that. If you convince yourself that you don't exist, that's a contradiction because you just convinced yourself. So if you convince yourself that you don't exist, who was it that you were convincing? Yourself. So that's a contradiction. He says, but there is a deceiver, supreme power, and cunning who is deliberately and constantly deceiving me. Remember the evil demon argument. Can he make it so that you don't exist, even though you believe you exist? He says, in that case, I too undoubtedly exist. If the demon is deceiving me, and let him deceive me as much as he can, he will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think that I am something. So after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that this proposition, I exist, is necessarily the true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. That's very important. The evil demon might make you think incorrectly and deceive you into thinking that there's an external world. The evil demon might fool you into thinking that 2 + 2 is 5 or 6 or 7. But the evil demon cannot reasonably convince you that you don't exist at all, because every time you think, you're proving your existence, as he puts there. He concludes, I think, therefore I am. So long as I am thinking, so long as you are capable of thinking, you know you exist. What is it exactly that exists, though? You may not necessarily be a body, since you can doubt your senses, but you must be a mind. But what is this mind like? Oh, 1 second. Oh, so apologies. I think I showed all the points here as opposed to showing them one at a time. So he says, at last I have discovered it. Thought, this alone is inseparable from me. I exist, that is certain, but for how long? For as long as I am thinking. For it could be that were I totally to cease from thinking, I should totally cease to exist. Yeah, if you stop thinking, you don't exist anymore in some meaningful way. What are the implications of this? Well, if you undergo brain death, you may no longer know that you exist, and that is a bit of a scary thought. He says, at present, I am not admitting anything except what is necessarily true. I am then, in the strict sense, only a thing that thinks. That's really all you can realistically say that you are, a thing that thinks, a thing with a mind. I am a mind, or intelligence, or intellect, or reason, whatever you want to call it, words whose meaning I have been ignorant of until now. But just for all that, I am a thing which is real and which truly exists. You are a thinking thing, and that cannot be doubted. What can this thinking thing do? Well, not just thinking, right? There's different variations of thinking. You can doubt, you can understand, you can affirm, deny, will, unwill, imagine, and you can have sensory perceptions. Whether those sensory perceptions are true or not is another matter, but you can have them, and you know that you can have them. So this, this is kind of the end of his second meditation. He ends with, I think, therefore I am. This can't be taken away from me. This is what I'm capable of, affirming, denying, doubting, things like that. And he goes on in his other meditations to essentially start talking about God eventually, but they're not really useful for us. The takeaway for this, right, is why is this important for us? Well, at the beginning of the lecture slides, we talked about the idea of mind-body dualism, or sometimes called Cartesian dualism. This is the idea that the mind and the body are fundamentally different things. You can doubt that you have a body according to Descartes, but you cannot doubt that you have a mind. Thus, the mind and body, again, must be two separate things, completely separate. However, according to him, you are primarily an immaterial mind, a mind that doesn't, it's not reducible. It's not reducible, according to him, to anything physical. So sometimes philosophers of neuroscience, they get into this problem or this debate as to whether the mind is reducible to the brain, right? Obviously, Descartes did not exist during the present, when we have all this neuroscience to maybe give us the correlates of consciousness, the physical correlates of consciousness. But really think about that, right? You can see a brain, but can you see a thought? If I crack open your head right now and look in there, there's a brain. It's mushy, it's wet, it's bloody probably. But if I were to do that, I wouldn't see your mind. I wouldn't see a thought. Is a mind reducible to the brain, according to you? Descartes would think no, they're two separate things. Descartes, in his later meditations, argues that you likely also have a material body, but there's, the problem of interactionism, which is a big problem in philosophy of mind. How does an immaterial mind cause changes in a material body if they're two separate things? Descartes would later argue that the two interacted in the pineal gland, which we know is obviously incorrect. But if you believe, right, there's a few ways to go about this. You could argue that there is no dualism, that's all material, right? That's all material. In which case, you're going to have to sort of argue why we have this perception of the mind, and if the mind is reducible, or our perception of the mind is reducible to something physical, where exactly is that consciousness located in the brain? Exactly, because scientists haven't figured that out yet. Maybe one day they will, but as of right now, they have not. So that's one option, right? To try and reduce everything to the physical in some way, shape, or form. Another way is to say that, yes, they're separate things, but yet they somehow still interact. Well, how do they interact? Do they interact somewhere in the brain still? So the problem isn't really taken away there. So there's a thinking exercise at this point, at the end of the slides here. Suppose that you were involved in a horrible car collision, and via a new scientific procedure, however, doctors were able to transmit your consciousness and memories into a new, empty body. After a day, you awaken your new body. The question is, right, and take a moment to think about it, do you still consider yourself to be you? Why or why not? Furthermore, what would Descartes say? Well, according to Descartes, your body's not really that important, right? Kind of like the emotions and the passions. It's kind of secondary. What you should primarily identify with, I won't even say primarily are, what you really are is a mind. So you would say, yeah, you're still you. Now suppose, however, in addition to having a new body, you also now unfortunately lose much of your memory. The doctors were overly optimistic regarding the procedure. Do you still consider yourself to be you at this point? Why or why not? Again, we can also ask what Descartes would think. Descartes would probably say that at this point you might start losing part of your identity. But do you agree on both of these answers to these questions, and why or why not? Oh, and that's actually it for today, folks. We're going to go ahead and continue our epistemology unit by looking at other views that are somewhat different from Descartes. But again, take away from Descartes, we can't know anything external. All we can know is that we have a mind. We are primarily a mind. And the body is, for the most part, pretty unimportant. The body is kind of relegated to a sub-tier below the mind. But that's it, folks. That's it for today. I'll see you folks next time. Bye-bye.